I am Ben Doc Askins, the psychedelic science war storyteller, and this is the Anti-Hero's Journey podcast. What's going on out there, all you Anti-Hero's Journey podcast fans? This has been Doc Askins bringing you another Q5 podcast. I picked the name Q5 because there are only 4 quarters in a year, and I wanted to be confusing. The actual reason for it is that I asked the same 5 questions to a whole bunch of really cool people out there that are questions that I often use in my own ketamine-assisted therapy practice here in Louisville, Kentucky. I do have some space available in my private practice. If you want to come see me, you can get on advancedpracticeproviders.com or give us a call at 502-771-1113. I also wrote a book. It's called Anti-Hero's Journey, The Zero with 1,000 Faces. It's a little bit of a riff on Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. I kind of take a punk rock perspective on whether that's a real thing or not. If that's of interest to you, you can go to antiheroesjourney.com and find all of that nonsense. That's why we call this podcast the Anti-Hero's Journey podcast. There's heroes and there's villains and there's people who have figured out how to integrate both halves of themselves, and I call those people anti-heroes. And somebody who I invited on the podcast today, who I know is on the path of integration, is Eric Osborne, the co-founder of Psanctuary Sacred Mushroom Church here in Louisville, Kentucky. He's also the co-host of the Psilocybin Says podcast, and he was a founder of MycoMeditations. He also is a multiple gourmet and psilocybin mushroom farm founder and has facilitated thousands of mushroom journeys and educated many more people during his 25-year tenure, working with psilocybin mushrooms. Sorry about that, man. Didn't mean to have a Freudian slip on you there, but
I'm tender today.
Yeah, slid that one in sideways on you. But I appreciate you taking the time out of your day, man, to just have a conversation and answer some of these questions with me.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, let's get going with question number 1. What's your story?
Oh, wow. Well, this could go on and on. I'm a bit of a storyteller. I'll try to keep it short. Grew up in Springfield, Kentucky, which is a little nowhere town here in Kentucky. Always had a deep connection and interest with nature. Even when I was 5 years old, there's recordings of me talking about mushrooms. And gosh, when I was 19 or so, I moved to the big city of Louisville, and some friends gave me some LSD, and I enjoyed that so much. They said, well, if you like that, you're going to love mushrooms. And they were very right. I had my first dose of mushrooms at 19, and something about it just felt like home. And I really devoted myself to psilocybin ever since. At that time, it was much more of a recreational thing, but I always felt like I was learning something, that I was healing something. I have a pretty rich trauma history. But I was just looking to kind of, get bent, as we say, that kind of paralleled with years of alcoholism and excessive cannabis abuse. But I've always been a pretty high functioner, graduated with a master's in education, became a middle school teacher, was a hobby mushroom grower from the time I was about 23. After my first dose, I kind of sought out quickly how to learn how to grow mushrooms, and got going, like I said, around 23. And then that turned into a gourmet mushroom farm because I really fell in love with mushrooms, generally speaking, and their ability to, rehab environments, heal our bodies, our minds, our spirits. Back then there wasn't a lot of information around like kind of plastics replacements and some of the really cool stuff that's happening in mycology right now. But I just fell in love with mushrooms and started a farm called Magnificent Mushrooms up in Indiana. Was also facilitating psilocybin journeys on the side there, and someone reported my then fiance and myself to law enforcement. We got arrested. It was all kinds of crazy. I went through almost 2.5 years of probation, 3 felony charges, all at the same time. That was in 2015. We got arrested in 2013. I had been starting these retreats in Jamaica, Myco, and that was the first psilocybin retreat anywhere at the time. And I was really not advertising it because I was doing all of this underground work and also selling mushrooms on the black market. And then so when we got arrested, I was able to finally um, go public with Myco because I was really proud of that work. We did amazing work back even, from 2013. And then in 2016, Pollen's book came out. The whole psilocybin world blew up, and all of a sudden we're surrounded by experts in a field that's brand new to our culture. And 2020, the retreats kind of got a little more, um, mm, just got a little more focused on high-end clientele, which I'm not opposed to, but I've just kind of always been like a people's person. I feel like mushrooms are almost free to grow, so they should be like, pretty cheap to access. And I believe in a peer support model in terms of psychedelic facilitation for the most part. Of course, deep trauma, and there are certainly circumstances where a trained therapist is really helpful. I tend to believe that's more in the integration space than in the actual space holding itself. And so the peer support, where people who work with mushrooms support people with mushrooms, because the people that work with mushrooms know how mushrooms work. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of the mushroom history. And then, well, I guess in 2020, my wife and I moved back up here to Kentucky. I had been longing to come back to my old Kentucky home for quite a while. So got out of the retreat business and started a church here, which I actually started a church in 2013, right before we were arrested, and it wasn't really structured enough to provide the religious support, freedom support, and so ended up not being able to use that in our defense. So anyway, I feel like in many ways what we're doing now is really coming back to our roots, because we are developing peer support, very, very accessible, affordable options for psilocybin, and this kind of ongoing, growing community of people that are just kind of, I like that phrase, Ram Dass, walking each other home.
Yeah. He's got a way with words for sure, right?
Yeah, he did.
I'm able to say one sentence that's got a lot more loaded in it than a whole lot of people can do with 500-page books. But you said a phrase there that stuck out to me that I wanted to double click on. It was the people who work with mushrooms know how the mushrooms work. And you and I had grabbed lunch, I don't know, a month or so ago, just to kind of connect and see what's what. And I admitted to you that I'm about as psychedelically naive as anybody could be. I was a straight edge kid growing up and a very religious Christian conservative for most of my life, and have just kind of started to find my way into the psychedelic space, kind of fallen headlong into it by accident in a bunch of ways around being a clinician and doing ketamine assisted therapy with people. But I'm incredibly curious about all of the other psychedelic substances out there, and like, what exactly does it mean to know how the mushrooms work? Would you be willing to expand on that as much as anybody could be able to?
Yeah, well, I think at first you have to, if anyone really knows how the mushrooms work, then they'll tell you that they don't know how they work.
Right. Yeah. It's all paradoxes the whole way down, right? Yeah.
The whole way down.
Be
Yeah.
super suspect of anybody who's certain that they've mastered it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. There's just so much of that. People that, coming out and saying like, this is what psilocybin does. And I promise you, you take mushrooms 10, 15, 20 times, you will learn very quickly you do not know what the mushrooms are doing, right? There are consistencies. There's a landscape of sorts, that I think we can become familiar with. But that's what I say as a facilitator, is that I our job is to do whatever needs to be done in the moment that it needs to be done. And sometimes, most of the times, that doesn't mean anything. But even still, like, it's so hard to put into words, with I feel like the more experienced you become with this space, then the more you begin to understand the influence of even your observation, and you you attempt to become less of an influence all of the time. And when you do need to assist or influence, you want it to be as subtly, as non-invasive, as to the point and concise, and then gone as possible. But it's just, it's we do we do a 16-week training within Psanctuary for 2 levels of ministry, and you can talk about all this stuff till you're blue in the face. I tell a lot of outside of the coursework, I have some anecdotal audio that I contribute. That's a bunch of stories of really very strange phenomena, things that you don't normally hear about in psychedelic therapy. And I still, until you get in there and you do it a lot, you have really it's hard to appreciate the unpredictability of the mushroom space. So I don't know if that really answers your question.
You mentioned something else there, and maybe the question is unanswerable because it's a good question. All the best questions are unanswerable ones, right? But you mentioned seeing unusual things, or like there's the paranormal question, or some of that sort of stuff in psychedelic space. There's people who are coming from east and west and all places on the entire compass rose with their assumptions and their perspectives about the way science works and about what philosophy is and about the way spirituality works. And it seems like the psychedelics wind up being slippery, or like a trickster energy throughout, right? But what are some of the sort of things that you mean whenever you're talking about unusual stuff, or
shared encounters of either internally visited entities or externally kind of clairvoyance. Some of the I've just seen some weird stuff happen, man. Some stuff people would want to call possession. There have been just a lot of, and I've also had the fortune of holding space. These were all group sessions that we did in Jamaica in particular, and we do group sessions and one-on-one stuff here with Sanctuary. But Jamaica was really unique because we had so many. We had 2 a month of 15 people coming from all walks of life, and many therapists and clinicians coming in who would then see some of this stuff happen. There was a lady that I worked with several times, and she would, at a certain dosage, it was, it's an hour-long story to really give you the entire context, but basically she felt that she was being possessed by this ancestor spirit. And before she communicated this to me, I was experiencing some kind of strange kind of communication from what seemed like something separate within her whole field of energy. And she had this wild clairvoyancy. There's this kind of clairvoyancy in the mushroom space that I've seen, with relative frequency, where an individual will kind of become a channel to deliver pertinent information. And they will very often feel compelled to go to a certain person and say, you need to do this. You need to understand this. This is happening in your life, or whatever. And this lady, we had 2 people who had just graduated, 2 nurses who had just graduated from the CIIS program. And we had 2 people from USONA, and none of these folks had ever taken psilocybin. They'd all had this, textbook. Yeah, they had this great textbook education on, what psilocybin does and how it works. And this client who I had worked with several times at this point, she took 6 grams and just turned into this clairvoyant machine. And she went she would spin. She'd go into these spins with her arms out wide, her eyes closed. She would spin for like, I don't know, 5 to 30 seconds. And then wherever she stopped, she would point her finger straight ahead at whoever was in front of them, and she would just blast them with all of their insecurities and all of their fears. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. The only thing I could do was like I had to keep her physically away from, because she was like spinning and
Spinning, yeah, a whirling dervish
all
from the
our
Ismaili
whirling dervish.
Sufi tradition. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And so I had to like keep her away from the fire and everybody else. And so there was nothing. And then so like, it's very frequently folks who are new to this will see something like this happen and they'll say like, well, why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you do something? And it's like, good luck. Because the more you try to contain this thing, the more it breaks free of the container, so that was like a crash course, and it's just, there's just so much, doc. There's so much, I think probably only 25% or so of the people who go into psychedelic facilitation, and I mean psilocybin, ayahuasca, kind of classic psychedelics, are going to really see it through, because it is, to really show up for this, it's so intense energetically. You have to put everything you think you know aside. And if you do it with real consistency and regularity, it's some of the most taxing and rewarding work that I think you'll ever do. So I have a bit of a beef with the what feels like a pyramid scheming, kind of capitalistic, take advantage of all the people that want to be psychedelic facilitators, and charge $10,000 or $15,000 for a course that has no practicum. So you don't really even know if this is something that you really want to do. And there have been dozens and dozens of therapists who have come to me either through Jamaica or here through Psanctuary and said, hey, I know that I want to do this. This is my future. And they get in, they do 2 or 3 or 4 sessions, and like, this is not at all what I thought it was. Yeah. So it's it's unique.
Yeah, it sounds like a calling, right? Like there's lots of people say, I want to be a surgeon, and then they cut somebody, and oh God, maybe there's a lot of blood in this room. I don't know if I can handle this. Yeah.
Yeah, I did one retreat that was a 15-person retreat of all therapists. There was a therapist friend of mine, his friend now, who he brought 14 of his colleagues down to a retreat, and man, that was a wild one, because most people came in with this kind of certain framework of how this was going to happen, and then it actually became one of the most, like, it was still to this day, it was the only session that I've ever had where I had to deal with violence and aggression. There, one of the therapists just completely stripped naked and got really violent, tried to attack me throughout the night. I kind of was like the matadors. That shit was intense, buddy. And he woke up at the end of it. He came to, and we're standing around the fire. It's just pouring rain, and he looked over at me and he said, Eric, am I naked? I was like, oh, buddy, that is the least of it.
You will always be naked in my memory. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and talk about paranormal stuff. That particular instance, still, I mean, there were multiple people that witnessed alongside with me, that this individual who ended up going on this kind of tirade through the night, at the start of it, we're there all together. I see him. He's standing within my eyesight the entire time. After about 20 or 30 minutes of him just kind of standing there by himself, he comes over, and we're standing in a circle. Like, there's 4 of us standing in a circle, and somebody looks over and says, hey, what happened to your eye? And this individual, he had a massive whelp, like somebody hit him with a baseball bat under his eye, kind of a little bit of a blood looking scar, and we were just like, oh my God, what happened? And we were watching him the whole time. He's just standing there. And at that point, we had our arms around each other, and at that point, his left hand crawled around and tried to stab my eye out, right? And so I ducked down, got out of it, and then we went through 6 hours of all this craziness where he had this whelp on his face. And I swear to you, I have multiple witnesses that after this was over and he came to, it was not there at all. It was completely gone. So what was that? I don't know, but I do know for 6 hours he was basically speaking gibberish naked while trying to charge me and others. So, that is an extreme outlier. I mean,
It's a Looney
I've
Tunes cartoon.
absolutely,
Yeah.
it was Looney Tunes. All right. And I mean, you know, I've done in Jamaica, I did over 3,000 doses, right? I administered, documented at minimum 3,000 doses. And that was only one time that it happened, right? So I don't want to scare anybody. I don't want people to think, but I do think it's
I appreciate
important.
that perspective, right? Yeah, we're telling war stories, and that's always the best stories, but they would be a little bit crazy, and it's percentages game, sure.
For sure, for sure. But I mean, I do think it's really important, particularly in this world where there's, like I said, like everybody wants to be a psychedelic facilitator, and because, you get to be there while people meet God and all that stuff. And yeah, you do. And there is also the outlying chance that something really big happens. And physical restraint isn't going to do it. This guy in particular was like over 300 pounds, big dude. I couldn't hold him down. All of us together couldn't have held him down. It became much more of an energy containment at that point. And so that's another thing that I feel like the medical psychiatric world really maybe doesn't have a great context for, is understanding, I guess, the energetics of this work. That was my very first mushroom trip in 1999. Over and over and over, it just kept saying to me, it's all energy. It's all energy, Eric. Everything. It's all energy. And that's what I've come to find in this work, that, our thoughts, our perceptions, the material, everything around us is, yes, it's all energy. And it's all, particular in a psychedelic session, is just a big soup pot of energy stirring together.
I'm gonna take it a slightly different direction as like a segue into maybe talking more about the church that you founded here. But I noticed like a long history of Kentucky being at the center of some of these sorts of channeled works that are famous, like the Law of One, I believe, was channeled in Louisville in the 1980s, and there's the Edgar Cayce readings of these sort of paranormal or psychic folks. Like Edgar Cayce would have been about as fundamentalist a Baptist as you could find, and then he was called the sleeping prophet. He'd just drop into this other space and say things that he himself did not agree with when he came out of those sessions. He'd say, what did I say? That doesn't sound like the usual Baptist Sunday school way of looking at the world. But he'd also come up with some strange poultices that would heal diseases that nobody could explain how that worked. And what do you think it is about Kentucky, man? Like, you're from Springfield. We're hanging out here in Louisville. What's
Yeah, I don't know. When we came back from Jamaica, there was some kind of an awareness raised in me that this was not a coincidence. And I recently had I mean, I guess you're okay with me talking about this. I recently allegedly had an LSD experience last year, out in Red River Gorge, where three of us simultaneously experienced this kind of uprising from the ground beneath us, and all of us experienced it internally, and then externally came and kind of communicated in the same way, that there were that what felt like these ancestors that were, telling us how important this physical space is, meaning, Kentucky, Appalachia area. And so I don't really have any, concrete evidence. Feels like a very special space. My family was heavily involved. They were the founders of the Cornbread Mafia, cannabis stuff. So like, there's like, I just know that plant medicine, tobacco as well. Tobacco gets bad rap, but tobacco is among the most widely used sacred plant medicines. And so there definitely seems to be something really magical about this land. I don't know what it is or why it is, but I feel it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I spend a lot of time in the woods just for fun, and I feel the same way, even in a non-ordinary state of consciousness about it. Yeah, it's a beautiful land. I ask people about their stories to get at some of the past and just to hear good stories, right? That's what a podcast is supposed to be about. But I also ask people about their intentions to get at imagination and about how they see the future. So what are your intentions going forward?
No, man. Yeah, I think my intentions with the mushroom work, and as well as my podcast, are kind of the same of what they've always been, is an attempt to wake us up to our own power, including myself. Wake ourselves up to our godhood. Our We are spiritual powerhouses. And a lot years ago, when I was kind of really getting into taking mushrooms regularly, like 2009, I started to really go deep. And one of the fundamental questions that I would continue to come out of that experience was what are we? I mean, we are so much more than we understand, meaning the human body. And since the work in Jamaica and seeing, I've come to understand us at this point in many ways as these kind of quantum processors that are always assimilating information and transmuting it. And then I see basically everything as the same, but with the human, we have the ability to use focused perception to direct that transmutation, to direct that energy. And we see, like, look at this world around us, all the amazing stuff that we've created just through our imagination. And I don't feel like that's like, or I do feel like that is some kind of metaphysical assimilation of all of the information that has preceded us that we are then transmuting into a current reality, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think I'm tracking. Yeah. We're like that word processors makes a certain amount of sense. Yeah.
You see, like, talk about like phenomenon when you see people who are 15 or 20 feet apart from each other, and you can tell that they are in some kind of connected co-processing, and where people will come out of an experience and talk about processing the memories, the childhoods of someone who is there with them, and not knowing. Sometimes they know who it is, sometimes they don't. Some people are like really skilled. Like, there's this pilot I worked with who just first time he took mushrooms, he got it. He's like, oh, I'm entering into the spirit world. Like, this is not just some psychological thing like I thought. This is the world of intuition. This is the world of spirit. This is the world of raw energy. And then he could go into these experiences and like, it's like he was like a natural shaman. I mean, he would go in and operate on people, and then they would come out of their experiences and say, "Oh my God, you showed up in my experience and did this thing." And he was like, "Yep, that's pretty much what I was
Yeah,
doing."
that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Huh. Yeah. Well, and I think like we're coming at spirituality like there's a new turn in the world where people are a lot more open to considering that than they have been in the late 20th century, with eliminative materialism kind of being a dominant paradigm, at least in Western world, of trying to figure out who we are and what we are, just sort of these gizmos that are wandering through the world here for a minute. And if we could just fill our stomachs and get laid often enough, then we die happy or something, was pretty shitty story to get sold to you. And we're kind of opening up to some other possibilities there, right? But I think even like the best science like recognizes that there's a mystery at the heart of it. Like, you can call it quantum foam, or you can call it the ether, like back in ancient Greece or whatever, but we're still talking about energy, right? Just different vibrational frequencies. You've heard of sound, but have you heard of ultrasound? Yeah, we use that stuff in medicine all the time, right? And I think we're just at the cusp of a whole lot more of what you described as processing, and then making new technologies and integrating old ones in a way that it's just an exciting time to be alive and raising kids and that sort of thing, man, for sure. But I think that's beautiful. What the way that I'll try to bridge people's intentions and pasts is by talking about gratefulness. So that's what brings us most presently into the present moment in my experience. So what are you grateful for, man?
Oh man, I guess I would fundamentally say existence. Even as challenging as it can be, I have been recently, since I've come to the awareness of why I suffer so much. I've been more and more public with it, and I mean, I'm a full on in recovery, borderline personality disorder, period. And I mean, I have not known why, but I have suffered so much in my life. I have felt so much intense pain and emotion. And I have always felt, even through that, that I would rather feel pain than nothing. I would rather be exist than not exist. So just that is a huge source of gratitude that I get to be and I get to experience the richness of this life. I mean, there's so many wonderful, painful, beautiful, challenging, joyous things. And then, like, to kind of bring it down to a more kind of basic level, my family. I didn't grow up with a very stable family, so I have a really incredible wife and children and a very stable home now. It's everything to me. Honestly, it is everything to me to be able to have that stability, to know that I can, whatever, have a breakdown and they'll still be there, or I can be like my most joyous self and it's not too much, you know. God, there's so much. I mean, mushrooms have been incredible to me for all these years. I mean, I've had such an amazing relationship with the mushroom, that very few people, I think, will ever get to experience something like that. And, you know, that I was brought into this world by spirit, you know, so long before it became popular. And I'm really grateful for that. Wow, I think it's wonderful people are coming into psychedelics now. Um, it is already being diluted by pop culture and Western medicine, and we'll eventually get back to a place of, I think, real rich authenticity. And there are certainly a lot of people who are working in a very authentic way with psychedelics and who are not trying to put them into this kind of pre-existing paradigm. But few and far between at this point. So I'm really grateful for where I've gotten to land in this whole changing of the guard. Is kind of what it feels like. There's a ton I could express gratitude for, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a good thing, right? Keeps you present.
For sure. For sure.
Fills you up. That's always been maybe the way I summarize my greatest struggle is just getting okay with being okay. Why am I not okay with, like, everything's good right now? Why am I looking over my shoulder for waiting for the other shoe to drop all the time? Like, what's wrong with being all right for a minute, man? Yeah, it's good here. I like it here. I think I could do this forever if I had to, you know? Yeah.
Well, good, because I think we get
to. Right? Yeah. That ought to be okay. So with all the story and all the experiences and all your intentions and all your gratefulness, what are you creating in the world?
Well, right now, Psanctuary is being created, and I love this more than anything that I have created thus far, because um, it is platforming others. It is a space where others get to lead, and um, it's just become really, really amazing to help empower others. That's something that I got a taste of, you know, having employees and having a farm and all that kind of stuff. It's like giving people jobs is cool. I love it. But in this community, it is going so much more beyond that, because it's allowing people to really live out passion, you know. That's, while there is the eventual potential, I think, for that to help them economically, it's more than anything, it's giving them kind of that, the ability to see the impact that they have on others. And I don't know that there's, I don't know. I think that's one of the most important things that we can try to access in life, you know, is to see that our lives help others live their lives more joyfully, more fully. That is exceedingly rewarding. And so Sanctuary is growing pretty quickly, and that's been a beautiful thing. It's full of a lot of struggle as well, but it's more joyful. And it's also, like I said, man, like the low cost access that we're providing is just, it's going to change the paradigm. I'm confident in that, and I'm very confident that spiritual practitioners will become seen not, I don't want to say the authority, but I think that there's going to be a shift in focus, and we're going to see that the double blind even came out with an article today about it, that medical therapeutic practitioners would do well to seek counsel from spiritual practitioners of psychedelics. So that's nice to be at the forefront of that. And then my podcast, I'm pretty excited about my podcast. I've been podcasting for, I don't know, 5-6 years. I started that years ago too with Magnificent Mushrooms. Psilocybin Says is a evolving show. We're getting ready to put out a whole new season that's going to be unlike anything that's going on in psychedelic podcasting right now. So yeah, so it was intended. Well, it was intended originally, and it has been kind of a psychedelic lifestyle podcast. But because Psanctuary has been such a big part of our work, we've ended up talking a lot about Psanctuary and interviewing a lot of people from Psanctuary, and so it hasn't maintained the focus that I really wanted it to. So my wife Courtney was co-hosting with me. She's getting ready to go do her own show for Psanctuary and interview Psanctuary folks there. And what Psilocybin Says is going to do is we're going to break up. I'm so excited about this. So we're going to break up topics into different chapters, right? And so each chapter will begin with me sharing one episode that will be like a 15 to 20 minute kind of monologue on the topic. So like I've got one of the first topics we're going to cover is sex. I think it's one of the most important and one of the most taboo topics. So I did a little short monologue on my kind of experience and understanding and thoughts around sexuality. I'm interviewing Kat Myers. I've got like 5 different people that I've interviewed for that topic that are all, either sex therapist or psychedelic sex or somehow create in that world. I've got a drag queen here in Louisville that I'm interviewing. It's going to be pretty awesome. So each of those interviews will be a separate episode that will fit inside of the chapter. And then we will close the chapter out with a conversation with my producer, who is also just an incredible mind. He and I will sit down and do kind of a recap of everything that we have learned together, because he'll be learning with me as he does the editing. So I think it's going to be a really awesome way to explore a huge variety of topics, and to like be able to circle back on different topics as we meet new experts or new just practitioners or experiencers. I'm more interested in talking to everyday people than to experts in a lot of ways. Experts obviously have a lot to offer, but there is so much that can be gleaned from just like having a real focused and heart-centered conversation with everyday people as they explore their place in the world ultimately, but in like with this particular various topics. So really excited about it. We've really upped our game on the audio quality. We've got a nice little studio space. We're going to have multi-cameras, and yeah, I think it's going to be something very different.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I'm excited to hear that come out. You let me know when you're going to do the Anunnaki series, and I'll tune in and listen to that one, man. All right. Yeah.
Oh my God. Wait. I gotta, just because I'm here with it. I think I told you the story about this dude, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The crystal skull.
The crystal skull.
Indiana Jones.
Shit's getting weird, folks. I don't know.
Nice. Well, that's a lot that you're creating there. I imagine you got like a short explanation for anybody that's not familiar with Silent P Psanctuary, like Silent P Psilocybin, your church. Do you want to just explain that for anybody that might not know that you provide psilocybin under the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act? You had attorneys drawing up the 508c1A, I think, probably, or C3 or whatever. Yeah, explain all of that in like as short a period of time as you can, just for anybody who's ignorant of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's, first of all, psilocybin in particular was a spiritual technology for thousands and thousands of years before it was a mental health, tool. And so I do pretty strongly believe that these are primarily sacraments and spiritual tools. And so, under the Constitution, we have the right to practice our free religion as long as it does not endanger public health. So we have a very well organized legal entity that has had several lawyers and several $1,000s put into it. And basically, we are a more and more decentralized. We're implementing holacracy right now to be as decentralized as we can be, non-hierarchical, where it is a faith-based organization, a community where people can come in, and if they haven't ever worked with psilocybin, then they can learn how to work with psilocybin through peer support, through the classes that we offer. If they have had experience with psilocybin, well, then they get to come in and share that wisdom with other people. A lot of integration. We have a ton of programs. We have so many integration circles. We have so many workshops in person, online. We've got almost 500 members around the country. We've got communities forming in Maine, Ohio, Indiana. So like really the hope and what it seems to be working out is this organization that is well founded in our legal constitutional freedoms, that provides an umbrella of support, safety, encouragement, education, and protection for people who are sincerely wanting to work with psilocybin to expand spiritually. And it doesn't mean that there aren't mental health benefits. I believe that the mental health benefits actually are an after effect of the spiritual growth that happens. And a lot of the research shows that the more mystical, quote, the experience, than the longer term the mental health healing is. So really trying to, in many ways, it's trying to recontextualize psilocybin as a sacrament, like I believe it, originally was, and is really ultimately best applied. So maybe that answers the question. They can check out sanctuary.org. Tons of things going on. Like I said, virtually those who are not members are welcome to join. A lot of them on Sundays. We have a Zoom service that's up to about 100 people now, pretty regularly, and that is a 10 Eastern to 12 Eastern, where we do like a half hour of meditation, journaling, inspirational reading, housekeeping, and then a 90-minute kind of ongoing integration where people come in, and we very often use the inspirational readings as a springboard for conversation. But people get to come in and talk about their experiences, talk about what's going on in their life, and just show up for and with each other. And that itself, I've been amazed at what people say they get out of that 2-hour Sunday service. It's just been phenomenal. And I'm coming from a ton of religious trauma. I'm the last person to trust the church. I tell people all the time, it would take me probably 2 years of stalking something like Psanctuary before I would join it. So, I understand that we're up against a bit of a wall, because of what's happened religiously in the U.S. and how psychedelics are portrayed, but I'm pretty confident that we are bringing something to this world that is really valuable and highly needed right now.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talked about, having a holarchic structure, and that you think of it as a spiritual technology. It's, there's the potential for abuse tends to seem to follow alongside of having a strict hierarchy where there's, somebody between you and God that tells you exactly what God says. And also over and over again, God wants you to write a check in my name or whatever, right? What are the chances that you need a new building in this church? I haven't been to a church that didn't need a new building in a long time. Haven't seen
we don't have a building right now
built, but yeah,
we're just a Zoom building. We do get, we do have monthly donations that members, $10 minimum is kind of how it starts, and so we're not raking in the dough, that's for sure. And our first kind of level of ordination that we offer, what's called the Myself Ministry, it's all about that. It's all about you being your own shaman, you being your own guru. Like, don't look to me because I don't fucking know. I ain't figured it out. Look to yourself.
Being upfront and honest about that's a big deal. It sounds analogous to me, like if you think of it as a spiritual technology, to like open source technology. It's open source spirituality is what you're pursuing there. Like, yeah, here's how much I know, and it's the head of a pin. But if we get enough heads of pins together and make it available for all of the people to start to look at, maybe we can start to sort out, like what I started off asking you about, like what the hell is actually going on whenever you're working with this particular medicine, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, cool. I appreciate you, going off on a little tangent there for me, explaining that, because I learned a bunch for sure. And that'll just bring us around to the fifth and final question, everybody's favorite, the old identity question. Who are you really, Eric Osborne?
I'm still trying to figure that out. I've been recently listening to this guy that I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he does this thing about creating alter egos and how like we create. He helps people achieve success through creating these alter egos. Like he worked with Kobe Bryant and helped him create this Black Mamba personality that he became on the court. And he said one of the interesting things is that people very often think that creating an alter ego is creating a false identity. But then when they become that alter ego and they embody their capabilities more fully, they realize that the old story that they were telling themselves was actually the false identity. So a lot of time, I'm starting to think that maybe like our journey through life, a part of it is exploring all of these different kind of identities to find out our most expanded version of self. Now, if I like think of who I am, like ultimately and beyond this body, then like I only experience consciousness of light. But if I come down to this little like flesh thing here that I am, I think ultimately I'm just a guy that wants to help other people get through this world. It's not easy. It's not easy, and I just want to encourage people to keep on going. So I love the anti-hero because I like this whole like I don't know. I don't think there is a hero. I think we're all just trying to get through this thing together, and we put on a facade sometimes like we're a hero, or we show up and we just do the thing that needs to be done. But that's just being a human being, like a more actualized human being. So like get us all on the same level, help us understand again that there are no gurus. You are your own, you know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You know, sometimes you got to integrate it all. That's what I call being an anti-hero is, you know, there's some days that's pretty heroic. Some days I'm pretty villainous. Some days I'm just a fucking bystander. Some days I'm nothing at all.
I had the realization the other day that I get to be the villain in some people's story. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, even though like I maybe not doing, they're making a story about me or whatever it is, you know, it's like, oh,
want to know how I got these scars?
Yeah. Appreciate you, Doc.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Having us. For being here. Here we are.
Here we are.
Be here now. More Ram Dass. Doc out.